a great place to come to commune and share community, because we really don't have, big community spaces here. So please come out as often as you can. And I'll try to post these on our meetup group as well. I'm still playing catch up. My mother was in the hospital, so I'm still playing catch up with all the updating and things that I have to do. I've been coming here how long?
Gosh.
You tend to know like by the day.
So Michael, I first met you in maybe March or April.
Okay.
Does that sound about right?
About right. I don't know. I just show up to stuff and I don't really time how long
You've been with us about 8 months.
Okay.
Yeah, about
So I've
8
been
months.
here about 8 months. I've been in South Carolina about almost 4 years now. I am a Reiki master teacher. I've been teaching Reiki, energy healing modalities, intuition, training and development for a little over 13 years. I'm an intuitive consultant, yoga teacher, physical fitness instructor, vegan nutrition specialist, Pi graduate, and I do tons of things, regressive hypnotherapy, you name it, I've probably done it, know someone who does it, or can point you in the right direction. As far as my witchcraft lineage, I am a practitioner and student of the Anderson Fairy tradition of traditional American witchcraft. So this topic was, before I do one of these workshops for this group, I always think of what would be most appropriate. So I always come up with two. It turns out, healing was the one that came forward. The other one was hexing and cursing. And, this one, after the events that have been transpiring, ended up feeling like the most appropriate. So we'll be doing some discussions around healing, what healing is, what healing isn't, how to empower ourselves to be better healers if that is our path, and how awaken the innate healing ability that we all have within us, because we all are healers, whether we realize it or not. And I ask that you ask questions. These are dynamic sessions. I usually come with a, I don't even have an outline. Whatever I post to the thing, that becomes our outline. And typically, I'm very tangential, so I tend not to stay on topic. So we can go wherever you need to go, because this is your workshop. I do have some very specific things that we will talk about, and things that we will do, because it's one thing to talk about healing, but if you don't do the healing work, then it kind of remains in that theoretical space. So we're going to do some very tactile and tangible things. I am going to record this simply because oftentimes people ask me to do so because they can't come to the class, but also sometimes in the class we'll do meditations and things that you may want to do again another time. And also, you may have forgotten to bring a journal to take notes in, right? So you can go back and listen to it as often as you like. When we get to the question-answer portion and we do the healing portion, we will not be recording. So I want us to have free space for talking about things that may come up, and we're going to do a mini attunement, and I'll talk about that when we get to it. But those things I won't be recorded. So. Or if you don't want to be on the recording, you want to ask a question or something, let me know, and I can always pause it. Any questions before we start? Before we get the ball rolling. This is informal, so if you want to use the bathroom, you don't have to raise your hand.
Oh, I do have a question.
Yeah.
So when you were younger, was there a time when you realized, or maybe you could tell us about the time when you realized, hey, I have some healing ability, or was there a time when you knew that you wanted to start healing others?
When I was little, I couldn't walk, so I was going to have leg braces, and the prognosis was that I would have leg braces for the rest of my life. But my grandmother, who was an avid PTL watcher, Christian television, that's what it was called back then, dating myself a little bit. But she would order these little prayer cloths and little prayer oils, and she rubbed my legs with them, and week later, the doctor said was healed. And I've had experiences like that ever since I was, I can remember. Traveled in many different directions before I found my spiritual path. And once it locked in completely. And I left a lot of very corporate things to do this work specifically, and it's what I've been doing ever since. So I love this. This is what I do full time. So the healing work, the teaching work, this is my passion. So it's something that, not just in doing the work, but teaching others how to do it. Because that's where higher education, hey, come on in. Join us. We're just getting started.
Yay.
I don't bite.
I know.
So welcome. So, teaching others how to tap into their innate healing ability, I think for me is even more profound than doing sessions, because when someone can tap into that thing themselves, then all this magic can happen. And that's a really powerful thing. So let's just all close our eyes for a minute and begin to tune in. Shake it out. Feel free to spread out a little bit too, right? This is like, we're not holding special circles and stuff. Feel free to, like, if you want to lay on the floor, you're more than welcome to. Do cartwheels, stand up, whatever you want.
Still working on that one.
If at any time you do feel overwhelmed by the energy, because with these types of topics, and before we do the attunements and the actual healing practice, sometimes stuff comes in. Feel free to take a step outside. The cold will ground you, and knock some of that energy off. So just close your eyes for a moment and just drop them into your hearts. Take a deep breath in. Exhale. Take a deep breath in. Exhale. Deep breath in. And exhale. For just a moment, allow yourself to show up in whatever way feels best for you at this time. Feel your feet on the floor. Feel yourself in the seat. And just feel the rise and fall of your chest as you breathe. Allowing yourself to have presence. This has been a chaotic week for many. Whether or not you're directly impacted by the events, you may be energetically feeling others' impacts. So just for a moment, let all that stuff just be. Let your body breathe naturally. It knows how to breathe. It's very good at doing it. And just continue breathing for a moment. I'm just going to chime the chime to clear the space. Breath in. Exhale, slowly return to the room as we now invoke the Star Goddess just to join us as we move through this process together. Holy Mother, in whom we live, move, and have our being, from you all things emerge, and unto you all things return. Open our hearts this blessed day, touch our bodies and our minds, walk with us through the gates of power, in shadow and starlight, in fire meeting earth, in the wind on the ocean, the sweet kiss of life. Blessed be our journey. So welcome. So let's start off with a question. What is the role of a healer? There is no right or wrong, so feel free to answer. Or I will start calling on people. I will do that. It's called shotgunning. We learned it in instructor training. What is the role of the healer?
To heal.
Okay.
Hey, there you go.
What is the role of the healer? This just lets me know where you guys are, so I know where to take this.
I think it's to facilitate the movement of energy through the natural pathways
Okay.
of the body.
Okay. What else? What's the role of the healer?
Be the conduit for that energy to pass through
Okay.
the universe to the person.
To be the conduit.
Be the conduit
Oh,
that it passes through the universe through you to the person.
Excellent. What else?
Give the person the power to heal themselves.
Give the person power to heal themselves. What else? There's no right or wrong.
Well,
So on the tip of your tongue.
when I was
let
in
it fall
Indiana,
out.
when I was living in Indiana, there were many, many spiritualists, those who communicate with spirits and the dead. And there were actually some spiritualist missionaries. And they would literally seek out those in the community who needed healing. So literally finding those who were sick to bring healing to them.
Okay.
Which was interesting.
It's like a healing ministry.
Yeah.
Type thing. What else? And the reason this question is so important because we're going to be awakening the inner healer. So if you don't have a definition of what healer is, it's going to be hard for you to touch and tap into that place within you that we're talking about. And oftentimes, especially in spirituality, we use these what I call spiritually vague words, like peace, or healer, or energy. We want to define these words for ourselves so that way we know to what we are reaching when we do this work. So for me, a healer is just someone who holds compassionate space for someone to have the opportunity to accept the invitation that healing offers them. A healer is someone who just holds you in love for a few minutes, or for however long you're sharing that space. A healer is a channel, a conduit. One of the things one of my teachers implanted early was that we use the word healer because when we're talking in context and we're talking about what we do with other people, it gives them something to bridge into us. But we are not really doing anything as healers. It's the energy, it's the space, it's the love shared in those moments, it's the silence, it's whatever is happening. That's the healer. We are just the holders of space. And it's an important thing to consider, because if you feel like you're doing something, right, you have to do something, then there is this assumption that you could mess it up, right? If I'm roller skating, and I haven't roller skated, I'm going to mess it up. I'm probably going to fall, right? When it comes to healing and doing healing work, there isn't really a way to mess it up. Because we're just sharing space and sharing love for a few moments. So when we're doing this work tonight, we're going to be talking more specifically tonight about doing healing work on ourselves. Because you want to be able to access this energy first before you begin taking it out and offering it to others. Not that you shouldn't or can't do that work immediately, but you want to be sure that you are also offering space for yourself to do healing here first. Because if you aren't accessing it, it's going to be even harder for you to trust that it's there when you give it to others. So that's what I mean when we want to look at these terms. So what is energy healing? What is energy?
holding space.
Holding space, right? What is energy
I
healing?
was listening.
Yeah, there you go. A+.
Holding space.
Oh.
Holding space. What else? What is energy healing?
Love.
Love. Okay. Anything else?
Light.
Light. Okay.
All of those are vibration. Energy is vibration from a source, whatever that source
Yeah.
that we say would be, because to love you have to, something has to vibrate.
Yeah.
Or to, you know, peace.
There's no wrong answers here. And the reason if you're like stuck on it, that's okay, because this may be the first time we hear these words a lot in spiritual circles. It's like when someone says, "What's a witch?" It's like, well, depending on who you ask, it could be any number of things, right? So it's important for us to ask ourselves, and these words are mutable. Today, energy healing may be eating delicious food, and taking the energy of the food into my body. Energy healing could be having great sex. Energy healing could be singing and dancing and moving my feet across the floor. Energy healing may be going and doing a vigorous workout in the gym. You know, all of those things can be energy healing, right? And we'll talk about some specific modalities so that, you know, you can put energy healing into certain contexts, and then you can access very specific forms of energy. But energy healing can really be any of those things. And I want us to think in the freedom of it can be any of those things, because if you're not a Reiki practitioner, a Soma Pai graduate, or a quantum healing therapist, or whatever else is out there, sometimes there's this idea that I can't do it because I'm not that. But everyone has the ability and capacity to access healing. Has anyone here not received an energy healing session before? Anyone never? Okay. Who has? Okay. Well, after tonight, everyone will have. If you choose so. If you choose so. So now the next question is, what is the inner healer? Come on, feel it's right there.
That's a tough one. I'm going to let Lewis help me with that one, and I'll get back with you.
Chris.
I think you have to work this much
It's
today.
being able to love yourself enough to allow you to take the energy on yourself.
Okay.
And be able to allow it to heal you. Because a lot of times we want to help other people, but we forget to help ourselves.
Okay. Excellent. What else? When I say inner healer, what am I talking about? What does that mean to you? Because whatever reason that brought you here, the very fact we're working with the inner healer, it brought you here. So something inside of you is reaching for that thing within you that is the healer. So this is the part of us that works miracles. It's what we can call the God soul. It's the part of us that, through alignment, can bring the body into balance and wellness. Okay? So there are these parts of us that we can access through different healing modalities. But outside of those modalities, or even the practices, this thing is constantly working. The body is constantly in motion. It's never fully still. It's got all these beautiful little processes that are happening just as we're sitting here. You know, the heart's beating, you're taking in oxygen, you're releasing carbon dioxide. All this stuff is happening very consistently in the body. And sometimes those systems go awry, right? And they usually go awry because we don't listen to the body. And we're not taught to listen to the body. This is not something that we generally do. Until something goes wrong. And then, sometimes even then, we don't listen to the body. So an example, my mother was just hospitalized. And she was having symptoms months before, but she kind of brushed them aside. You know, we listen so much to the body. But then it got to a point where she was having severe pain and having very severe symptoms, so then she couldn't ignore it anymore. And then she went to the hospital, and then a series of things unfolded from that. But it was because she finally had this, and she describes it this way, she had an intuition that she could not ignore what was happening. And your body talks to you that way. So as part of a daily practice, I recommend people just stopping for a moment and listening to their body. Just like we did at the beginning of this, right? Just pausing for a minute. You can even bring your hand to your heart and just spending a few moments listening to what your body is telling you. Are you hungry? Are you needing rest? Are you needing something? And just asking your body these questions. It's a way to work with that natural intuition the body has towards moving you into greater states of health and healing. And it's a very simple alignment practice. Right? Just bring your hand to your chest. Everyone do that for a second. Just bring your hand to your body. Right? Feel the rise and fall of your chest. Too often, we do what I call living on the inhale. We do this, right? And then people start shallow breathing. As a yoga instructor, I spend most of my time reminding people how to breathe. Even in the gym, as a personal trainer, people will press the weights and they'll start turning beet red because they're not breathing, right? And you can't run a marathon on a single breath. But we try to do that in our lives pretty consistently. So another way of looking at the inner healer, if we want something more tangible or tactile, the breath is the inner healer. Because without it, well, you won't be here very much longer, right? So taking time to connect to our bodies, to breathe, and to really, for our own selves, ask the question, what is the inner healer? So in awakening the inner healer is awakening our connection to that part within us that helps us to move into greater states of healing and well-being. And there are several different pathways to access the inner healer. And one of those is meditation. So meditation is one way we can... Who meditates regularly? Who meditates sporadically? Who has thought about meditation but really hasn't given it much thought beyond that, right? Okay, right? Most people meditate whether they think about that or not. If you've ever gone into the Facebook scroll of doom, you're meditating, right? Because you're doing this very monotonous, it's right? Might as well just while you're doing it, because it's like spinning the prayer wheel. Okay? So if you've ever got caught in the Facebook spiral of doom, you've meditated. Or if you've ever gotten lost on YouTube, you've meditated. You've unconsciously meditated. Or if you've Netflix binged, right? It's like meditation. Times procrastination equals whatever. But those are ways that we will sometimes, the body will unconsciously take you into places where you're getting rest, where you might not have been getting it. But meditation is one way we can access that part of us. Prayer is, it's often said, prayer is talking to God and meditation is listening. And beyond that, in our tradition, we say God is self, self is God, and God is a person like myself. So it's really listening to your inner divinity. It's accessing that part of you that holds all those answers, that holds the deepest intuitions and the deepest connections to who you truly are. So meditation, and we're not going to get too specific about what type of meditation, but whatever meditation works best for you. There is no right amount of time that you should do meditation, or, not doing it is sometimes doing it. So depending on what feels best for you, give yourself the chance to maybe take on a practice, especially if you are having a desire to do healing work on yourself or with others. Meditating in a group is a great way to access healing through the group space. And we're going to do a group healing session tonight too, so that you can feel what that feels like to be in entrainment with a group of people setting a very specific intention. And I think they do a meditation group here on Mondays. There's free meditation groups in the area, so if you're struggling with meditation, email me and I can send you resources. I do meditations on the radio show. There's tons of ways to get meditating if you haven't been meditating. How we eat is another way to access healing and well-being. So being conscious of how we are connecting to nutrition and what we're putting into our bodies, right? This is a very powerful way to access healing. So being very conscious about those connections you're making to nutrients and to sustenance. Being mindful of the emotions that are reaching out for food and for nourishment. And when you go to sit down to eat, you can do the blessing the food, but something else you can do is ask, what part of me is asking for nourishment at this time? What part of me is asking and reaching for nourishment? Yeah.
Can you give an example of that?
Yeah, so maybe usually we do reactive eating. Something doesn't go your way, or chocolate, right? So we reach out, but sometimes we do that very unconsciously. So if there's a part of me that's in discord, and chocolate can fix that, and I reach out consciously to the chocolate, it becomes a very purposeful act. It's purpose-filled now, versus an unconscious thing, where there's little to no control. The emotions driving the car. If I pause for a second and say, what in me needs nourishment? My anger, my grief needs nourishment. Well, let me consciously eat this chocolate and savor it as an act of healing versus as an act of war, right? And we'll talk about acts of war and acts of love here in a second, but sometimes when we do reactive eating or reactive things, we're going to war with the emotions without even realizing it. And that's a big thing. We have to be very cautious and very mindful of what inside of us is asking for and reaching for healing. Because remember, energy healing doesn't just affect us physically. It affects us emotionally, spiritually, energetically, and physically. So there may be something much deeper in you that's asking for the healing. Something deeper than your stomach growling may be asking for the food. So that's one way we can become more conscious of how we're connecting to our bodies. Physical fitness is another way. It's another pathway. Moving the body, doing a physical practice like yoga. The beauty in yoga and practices like Qigong are that there's an inherent spirituality in those practices. Unlike going to the gym and doing weight training or conditioning work, very seldom are you doing some spiritual practice as part of that. But it's very simple to add in this nice little mantra before you start and saying, as I engage my body today through the act of lifting weights, I'm going to empower love in everything that I do, right? When I teach yoga classes, I have my students invite their emotions to the practice. All too often, and I see this a lot in yoga classes, instructors will say, what part of the body do you want to work on today? Well, let's work on our hips, let's work on our shoulders, but we have all this other stuff that also needs our attention. So why not invite it to the table, right? When you come in for a Reiki session or energy healing session, it's all that stuff. All that stuff is important. But sometimes we don't know what we're touching. Like when I asked initially, like, why are you here? There may be something deeper that brought you in here, So we remain open and receptive to all of those levels. But it's important to ask those questions, like, why am I working out today? All too often, especially with fitness, we have to be cautious about how we're engaging it. Things become acts of war, or they become acts of love. Meaning, a lot of times when I'm doing training with people, I ask them, well, why are you working out? Like, what's the reason that you're here? Well, I don't like the way I look. So, by not liking how I look, every time I lift a weight or do a pose, I'm affirming to myself that I dislike myself. And that's a very potent affirmation that we're doing. I hate the way I look. I hate the way I look. I'm going to force change, right? And that's going to war with the body. Versus, I'm doing this practice because I love myself enough to do it, without any expectation. It would be great if this was a side effect of this practice, but I'm just going to do this because I love myself enough to do it, right? And it's a very thin line. But if we're asking these questions of ourselves as we are engaging different pathways, we are creating space for us to acknowledge, is this an act of war, is this an act of love? Is this healing, or is this destruction? Right? So becoming conscious of the affirmations that are bringing us into healing practices can give us the ability to do real healing, not just superficial stuff. The superficial stuff is, I finally got to the goal weight, and I forced my body there. My body is now tired, beaten, and broken. And then, I used to do competitive bodybuilding. And bodybuilding is like, there's a thin line between fitness and being very unhealthy, right? And you've beaten your body in submission to go on this stage and do this very narcissistic thing, right? And then, all of a sudden, you're done, and the body goes, we're done. So what happens? You go all the way back to where you started. Because the body's like, you can fight me, but I will always win. Right? It's like battling some unseen entity in the room. It will always win because you can't see it. But the idea is, if I learn to love myself enough that I'm going to let myself be aligned, healed, and whole, then there's a greater capacity for healing to happen. Real healing. You know, and the side effect may be that you improve body composition, that you become more flexible, and that X, Y, and Z can occur, right? So the other pathway is doing a modality. And we'll talk about different modalities here in a second. Any questions? I'm going through a lot because, we don't have like 6 hours. So I'm trying to stay to my chart as best I can. Are there any questions about anything I've talked about so far, or any questions that are on the tip of your tongue or at the base of your heart? Any questions? No? All right. So because this is CUUPS, I always like to throw in, how healing relates to magic workers. So witches and some magic workers, depending on your path, so I'm not saying everyone here is a witch, but even as healing practitioners, specifically as witches, our role is to tend to both light and shadow. Healing doesn't just happen in the light. The light can also burn you. If you sit in the sun too long, you will get burned. You can get very sick, right? Sitting in the dark too long, you don't get the nutrients that the light brings you. So oftentimes as witches, or even as healing practitioners, we stay in these places of dusk and dawn, betwixt and between, the in-between spaces. And I can remember from, when I was way into the New Age movement, I was doing all this light work and bringing in all the light, right? And my intuition came in one day and said, the more light you bring in, the bigger your shadow gets. And if you ever shine a light like on your hand and pull the light back, the light's growing in proportion to the shadow growing right behind it. And if we're not willing to turn around and look at our shadow and the message that our shadow brings us, we're not accessing healing completely. The parts of us that we resist are the parts of us that need the most love. Our addictions, our pain, our trauma, our grief. Those parts of us that we don't often let ourselves feel or experience. Our anger. We're taught to suppress, repress, and we end up depressed. And I did a class here a while back on shadow work. But doing shadow work is essential to healing, especially self-healing, because it may be hard to share these things with someone else, but one of the most powerful tools in your toolbox as a witch, a pagan, a healer, a druid, is a journal. Because in the journal you can write and experience in a safe way these things that may not be something you want to share in tandem with someone else. But all those parts of us are there. They're the parts that need the most love. I've dealt with addiction. I've been in relationship with addicts. So I just use this as an example. If we don't honor and accept this part of ourselves and the messages and the lessons that it brings to us, we end up at war with it. And we can fight this part of us, right? And if it's driving the car, because of all the other stuff that's attached to that thing, it can take us into very dangerous and toxic places. But really being honest with ourselves and looking at these things within us that are attached to the addictions. What's the message that my shadow is bringing me? What is the message of my procrastination? Do I need rest? Or am I avoiding, or how is this an old pattern that I used to use to avoid trauma? Did I use Netflix as a way to avoid having conversations with my ex? Is this just old trauma playing itself out still? So when we come into communication with those parts of ourselves, we can learn a lot, and we can direct very specific healing to those parts of ourselves that are really calling for healing. If you've ever had heartbreak, right? Who here has never had heartbreak? Okay. I was hoping someone raised their hand, right, so we could celebrate them. But, there's a moment where we go through the 5 stages of grief, right? We go through the anger, the guilt, all that stuff, the depression. Hopefully we get to acceptance, and they're all mutable, and we all flow through them. The one that I add to the 5 stages of grief is integration. The moment you can get to a place where you can light a candle and you say thank you to that relationship, that's when you're doing the deeper work of integration. Psalm 23, I prepare a table in the presence of mine enemies. I didn't slay my enemies. I didn't kill them. I invited them to the table with me so that we can commune together. What's your message for me? You know, thank you to my addiction for the lessons it's brought me. And then beyond that, I love you to my addiction for what it's brought me and the lessons that it's offered me. So that's the heavy lifting work, and it's not easy to get there, but through meditative practice, physically engaging the body, eating great food, having great sex, whatever your healing practice is, you can get to that deeper stuff. We want to do this stuff with consciousness, because there are 2 forms of healing that I often see. There are the conscious healers and there are the unconscious healers. Unconscious healers is what I see all too often. Unconscious healers just kind of give it away. They're the ones who are empathic, and they walk into a room, they absorb all the muck, and everyone else just starts feeling really great, you know? And it's like they're like this sponge, and they don't even know why. Now they're miserable, their whole day begins to suck, and everybody else is great. Or you end up in these fixer-upper relationships constantly. You know, you're like, I don't know why. Every person I date is broken. Right? Every person I date is broken. Or every job I take, I end up being the one that fixes it all. Right? So you're very unconscious in how your path is that of the healer, but you haven't been either awoken to the fact, or you haven't awakened within yourself that conscious connection to being a healer. So you're still doing your work, except unconsciously. Right? Which can be very dangerous, because when we're consciously healing, we're setting up boundaries. We're creating safe places for us to discharge the energy. We're taking on training for protection. We're doing that type of work on top of everything else. So it's important to understand where you are in that process. Or if you're noticing patterns where you're like, I should be charging for this. Well, yeah, you probably should be. You know? So look at where you may be unconsciously doing healing work. Because once you understand where you are, you can set up boundaries. And the hardest thing for a healer to do is put up a boundary. Healers have a hard time saying no. It's difficult to say. But as a practice, we want to do the mantra, no. No. Let's do it together. No. There you go, right? So you can take out your beads. No. So then someone says, hey, can you stay late? You're always staying late. No. Right? This rolls off the tongue after a while. But if we're not used to saying it, and oftentimes, something else that I always put out there for healers is that we have to be selfish. And that's a difficult word to hear, but it's one of the most powerful things healers can do. Selfish not in that I'm not going to help other people, but selfish in that I need to be more conscious of where I'm giving myself away without reciprocation, without some type of payment, at the expense of my personal boundaries, right? And this can be with others, but also to ourselves, right? It's like when Netflix says, do you really want to watch one more episode? You're like, oh, yes, right? At that moment, you've crossed the boundary. Because part of you saying, you know, you really should go do that thing you said you were going to do. But just one more episode. You know, is it ever just one more episode? No. So being very conscious of our boundaries. And how do we become more conscious of boundary work? Write them in your journal. The journal really is the most powerful spiritual tool we have as practitioners. So now some of the different modalities that are out there. Who here has heard of Reiki? Right? It's probably the most common modality. And there are a bajillion different... There's this place that I used to go to in DC called Terra Crista. They literally have a Reiki menu. They have 15 different kinds of Reiki. You can get Lemurian Reiki, Rainbow Reiki, Unicorn Reiki, you know. You can have all kinds of Reiki, right? It's like Reiki for this, Reiki for that. But way back when, it was Usui traditional Reiki was the standard practice. And that's the practice that I take on. And you'll have Reiki traditionalists who say this is the best Reiki or that's the better Reiki. I don't know. It's just all Reiki. Reiki doesn't care. Reiki just wants you to do it. It has nothing to do with if it's better or less than or where it came from. So Reiki I like because Reiki is one of the easiest practices to learn. And my gauge for how effective a technique is can you do it on yourself? If you can't do it on yourself, it's only half effective. Because, you know, you shouldn't have to run out all the time and ask for healing. You should be able to do this work on yourself. So Reiki is one of the more common ones. It's easy to learn. I teach it. It's a very gentle energy. It's a very gentle transmission of energy. So I like it, especially if you've never had energy healing before. It's probably one of the best modalities to try out for the first time because it's gentle, it's subtle, it aligns you in very gentle ways, but it's also lasting. It has profound effect. A modality that I do is called Soma Pai. It's full circled healing, meaning it's soul level healing. It combines energy, prayer, touch, and sound. There are only there's only 2 teachers in the world that teach the technique. I've been practicing it now for about 13 years. It's a lot, not saying that Reiki is less strong, but I find this is much more potent. It hits you harder and faster. It's the one that if we don't have a lot of time and it's critical, that's the one I typically go for. So different modalities will have different strengths. Different modalities will have different intensities. And it's important for you to understand that you can ask questions of your practitioners. So if you're going out and you're going to get healing from someone, ask them questions. The very first question I always ask someone is, do you use this on yourself? And I ask that because if they say no, well, it's not good enough for you, it's not good enough for me. Right? So, you know, ask questions, explore. There are tons of ways to heal and to connect the healing energy. But Reiki tends to be the one you can find almost in every corner. But even with energy healing, you have to be cautious. Taking on the Reiki training it's powerful. But remember, you have your own innate way to connect to this stuff too. Hands-on healing simply is putting hands on body, initiating touch, and surrounding yourself in love. So everyone bring your hands to your heart center, hand over hand. This is the most powerful healing technique you can ever do. Whether you are a Reiki practitioner, Soma Pai, quantum healing, witchy witch, whatever, right? This is the most powerful thing you can do. Bring your hands to your heart. Keep your hands there for just for a second. Why? Because it becomes a physical affirmation. As I bring my hands to myself, I align myself in myself. As I release my hands, I release all that's within my heart. So as you bring your hands out, the body just naturally understands this affirmation. When people cry and they're in deep grief, they do this, right? When people are in pain, they do this. The body knows this is where it hurts. The hands naturally gravitate towards pain. Stub your toe late at night. Your hands immediately go towards your toe, right? Have a headache. Your hands do this. So the body knows how to initiate these processes. So bringing your hands just into contact with yourself can be powerful. Touch is one of the most powerful ways we can heal. When I used to do Reiki at an HIV/AIDS clinic, it wasn't the Reiki that was initiating healing. It was the fact that we were initiating touch with people who felt untouchable. And that took down a wall that allowed whatever else was going to happen in that space to happen. And that's a very powerful thing. when we do healing work, we go into this work without any expectation. So Phil comes to me and he's like, Mike, my tooth hurts. We're not going to do healing with the expectation that we're going to fix his tooth. We're doing the healing with the expectation that for a few moments I'm going to give Phil unconditional love. Whatever happens in that space happens. So we never make promises as healers, because the healing will do what it needs to do. We don't know what that might be. There may be some deeper subconscious thing that's causing the pain, or the tooth may be what brought him to the session to heal the trauma that's still impacting his solar plexus, right? So that's how this stuff works sometimes. So when we do the healing practice, we want to be receptive and open, free of expectation, so that anything can happen in that space. The one guarantee for most healing sessions is that you'll feel very relaxed, which is also happening now, right? As energy comes in, because we're about to do our healing work here in a minute, people tend to get very relaxed, very calm. So you may notice that as we go through the rest of the night, but we'll wake you up before you leave. I have very special ways of doing that. So prayer is also another effective modality. You know, prayer therapy is very powerful. Tonal healing, doing tones, like to affect the chakras. So bring your hands to your heart for a second, and I'll show you tonal healing. So bring your hands to our heart. We bring our attention to our heart center. Just close your eyes for a second. Whatever color your heart chakra is for you today, oftentimes we envision it as green, but at this moment, let your heart chakra be whatever color is best for you. I'm going to tone once the sound for the heart chakra, which is ah. The second time you'll tone with me. Just do this twice. Ah. Deep breath in. Together. That's tonal healing. We can direct very specific energy to the heart center. Open your eyes. How do you feel? Good.
Feel toned.
Yeah. Feel toned. Yeah. So that's one way to do healing. You can do that for every chakra. Sometimes you can do that with specific sound frequencies, singing bowls, chimes and gongs. There's limitless ways to engage healing. The only way to mess this up really is to not do it. You know, it can be simply like taking a nap. That could be your healing practice today. Like, I binged Netflix all night. I'm taking a nap. You know, so let yourself have that nap. Let yourself have that thing that you're needing. Let's see here.
Look, Mike, you feel like a question? You have time for a question?
You have plenty of time.
Okay. Would you say, and I hope this isn't a dumb question,
No such thing.
that there are some forms of prayer that are more effective than others, or would you say there's a right way of going about praying?
No. If you're going to pray, really feel the prayer. You know, like for instance, we can do the prayer at the beginning, Holy Mother, and we live, move, and have our being. I can go rote and just, I've memorized it, I've gone through it, I set the intention. Or we could say, you know, we could just flow into it and say, Holy Mother, Holy Mother. And that could be the whole prayer. And that could be enough, right? It doesn't have to be elaborate. And there's books out there that will tell you these like formulas and prescriptions for prayer. And even in Reiki, you'll see like H1 plus G2 equals, you're touching like the big toe now, and like that's healing for whatever else, right? I don't know. All I know is people show up, I put my hands there, and things go great. You know? So we go with that expectation, but even prayer, right? We don't, we want to be sure that we're just feeling and embodying the prayer in whatever way feels right. You know? My prayer may be crying. Sometimes I've had clients come, they want to do prayer therapy, and we'll sit and cry together. That's the prayer. Right? Sometimes the prayer is just laughing with them. Right? Sometimes the prayer is just sitting in silence. And so maybe I don't have the words, but my heart has these words that my mouth isn't able to speak. And that's enough. Just setting the intention for the space to be there for prayer can be powerful. So prayer therapy can be powerful. There are Christian Science groups that use very specific prayer therapy guidelines that can be very effective, and I've used those. So there are like these very prescriptive protocol type things that you can do, but I often find that the danger with protocol is that you can become so like, that you lose connection. It's like the first time you do yoga, it's like your body's like feeling all this stuff, but by the 1000th class, you're like just going through the motions. So sometimes when you just do things rote, you lose connection to the energy. So it's a good idea to let things just be. But even if it's a prayer you've done every day since you were 3, do it with full embodiment. Let yourself be fully conscious of the words you're using. Be mindful. That's how we show up to the practice. The most difficult part of healing or any other spiritual practice is showing up. Anything beyond showing up is icing on the cake. Or spread on the bagel. Any other questions?
Can I just make a clarification?
Sure.
When I said I was interested in the Church of Religious Science, it's not Scientology and it's not Christian Science.
No, but I used it as an example that there are
okay,
Christian Science groups that use very prescriptive prayer models. And I just pointed in your direction.
I just wondered.
No.
Oh.
I know the difference.
Okay.
But there are like Yogananda's self-realization group uses very prescriptive mantra to do very prescriptive things, and like Mary Baker Eddy has very specific prayers in the Christian Science that are directed to, like, even Hoodoo, Voodoo, these different groups have very specific. They use the Psalms in very prescriptive ways to effect very prescriptive magic. So maybe that works, but maybe just letting go and seeing what happens can also be magic. Like, for instance, if you have to burn a candle and you like doing money work and it says use green, you're like, oh, I got some black candle. Can you not do the magic now? No. You light the candle. Right? Because I've set the intention. The gods don't care. They just want you to show up with full intention and do the work. Any other questions before we do the practical? Before I pass out the tests. Everybody get up, shake your arms out, stretch out a little bit. You can still ask questions, but just stretch out some before we start this next part. Any questions? Anything? Reiki, spirituality, witchcraft, paganism.